I'm Rob.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome to Let's Get Ethical.
Welcome back in, everybody. Rob, how are you?
Welcome back, everybody. Mike, I love our intro.
Oh, tell me about it.
You are the magic man. You are the magic man. You are absolutely the magic man. I love our intro.
I am 100% loving it. I think it's awesome.
It is awesome. It's great.
I got a question for you today.
Yeah.
This happened out here a few months ago.
Okay.
And it just happened out in your neck of the woods. Nurses went on strike.
Oh.
I've worked at one hospital on the East Coast that was a union hospital, and I have to be honest, I never really considered whether or not we would go on strike. How do you feel about healthcare workers striking? How, like you personally, what is that? What kind of chord does that strike in you?
So for me, from my moral and ethical standards, I do not believe healthcare workers should go on strike and abandon our patients in the hospital. I draw the line on that.
So do you think that there shouldn't be unions? Ooh, that's a dangerous question. Isn't it?
That's a deadly question. So if you want just my personal professional experience,
yes,
I do believe that there was a point in time in the history and especially the beginning of the Industrial Revolution where there were a lot of bad things that happened in factories, right, with workers' hours and children working, etc. Unions had a strong purpose and a strong foundation, and unions definitely created better working environments, better working hours for workers over the decades. Do I personally feel that unions have a strong place now in modern society? I think that's debatable.
Fair enough. So I guess my thought or my question kind of revolves around, and I'll frame it this way. If there's a place for a union, doesn't the right to strike go hand in hand from a workers' rights perspective?
So to answer that question, that has always been the answer to unions. Am I wrong?
Right.
If we don't get what we want, or let me rephrase that. If the workers don't get better wages, better conditions,
right,
shorter work weeks, etc., people stop working. And that has been probably even before labor unions, right? People would say, we're not going to do this. We're not going in. We're not going to the factory. We're not going to whatever it was.
Yeah. The problem that arises doesn't come from the walkout. It comes from the industry.
It's the fallout. It's
the industry. If you live in Detroit and you're making cars and you walk out, you make a statement. But if you're in healthcare and you walk out,
what happens to the patients?
Right. What happens to the patients? And nothing against unions.
Not at all.
But what does that mean? And for everybody listening, what we're talking about is what recently happened at Mass General Brigham
in Boston,
Massachusetts. Around 4,000 nurses planned a one-day strike. And this was actually the largest nurses' strike in Massachusetts history, as I understand it. Is that correct, Rob?
That's my understanding of what I've seen posted by the MNA, et cetera. Yeah, it was the largest nursing strike in Massachusetts history.
And for everybody listening, MNA is Massachusetts Nursing Association, right?
Yes.
Or Nurses Association. Correct. So they planned a one-day strike, and they did. And one of the things that, being a member of a union, I am, the union has a responsibility to inform and make sure that it's planned. They're not just not showing up one day, right? So there's a whole whole format. There's a whole way about which this goes. I said that really strange, but you understand. It was grammatically correct, just really weird. And so they did everything appropriately. They planned their one-day strike. And in response, Mass General Brigham had to bring in what we call, I don't know if nursing calls it registry nurses. We call them registry. We call it registry.
They're contracted employees.
Yeah, temporary nurses under contract.
Yep.
And this is where I don't have a great answer. I know we bring in one-day employees all the time. Mass General says that the nurses that they had to bring in to cover these nurses that were these 4,000 nurses going on strike they had to contract through a traveling agency, which means they had a minimum of 5 days that they had contract for.
That's correct.
And it doesn't sound to me like the union or the nurses that went on strike were informed. And when they came back to work, they were effectively locked out so that Mass General would allow these other contract nurses to work out their contract. Now, one day is hard enough. When we bring in, you're a manager, when you bring in somebody from registry, do you bring them in and throw them in the NICU?
Nope, absolutely not.
Right.
No.
Do you bring them in and throw them in the ICU or ER? Only if you gotta.
Only if I gotta. Yeah. Only if
but if you don't have to, you take your standard people, you put them in the higher acuity areas, and the registry employee, the contract worker, they go to the floors where it's lower acuity, even though it's a high acuity hospital, it's a lower acuity area within the hospital, right?
That makes the most
goal.
sense.
That's the plan.
That's the goal. Fill the holes.
What Mass General had to do in response to this, and I'm saying in response because it had to be their response, is they had to fill all of those positions temporarily.
And to be clear, it was intensive care units, cardiac intensive care units, med surge units,
ER,
et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I believe the emergency department was fine.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think that's what I read. And
do they have a labor and delivery NICU there?
They do. At MGB, both hospitals have L&D and both have neonatal intensive care units.
So now this whole contract negotiation breakdown stemmed from a request by the union to increase pay. And their request was let me make sure I get this right. Give me a sec. Let me make sure I get this right. It was a 3% raise over the next 18 months and was it a 4% raise? I'm sorry, 3% raise for the first 6 months, 4% raise over the next 12 months of an 18-month contract. So a blended about 3.5% overall raise is what they were looking for.
Correct.
Now, what Mass General would argue is that they have this guaranteed step increase that I believe is a 5%. Is 5% or is it 2.5%? It's 5% step increase.
Yeah.
But they only have 20 steps. So if a nurse is at 21 years, they're not getting that 5%. They do have a locked in 2.5% increase after that. But the argument I'd make, I mean, I'm not from Boston. I don't live in Boston. I understand Massachusetts, Boston specifically is a more expensive area to live. I'm from Southern California. I know what it means to have an expensive area to live in, right?
Yes,
5% in Southern California is barely cost of living. 2.5% doesn't quite cover it. And I'll be quite honest with everybody. I'm at the high end of my pay scale. I have gone years where I don't get a raise because the only way we get a raise is for our union to actually negotiate it. Now, I don't work in the hospital, though. I work at a community college. So the risk of or threat of a strike means something considerably different at a community college, right? Like I said, it's industry. It's where you're at. It means something a lot different at a community college than it does to a hospital with patients.
So if you're
Yeah.
So let me just, let's just put this out there. You work in a hospital, you work in an intensive care unit, labor and delivery. You're a nurse. You've been a nurse for whatever, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years. You work for a labor union. They decide that, hey, we're not happy with the negotiation at the bargaining table. So in response to that, instead of being good stewards, we're just going to have a 1-day strike, which, again, to Mike's point, you can go on strike. It's their right to do. It's their right to go on strike. Mm-hmm. They notified both organizations that this was the day we were going to have a 1-day strike. And in response to that, the hospital said, we need to ensure that we have nursing staff available. So they brought in expensive contracted employees that you can't just have for 1 day. It's a minimum of X amount of days. So the hospital has an obligation to keep the doors open, right? The nurses are saying, well, we have an obligation to the union to go on strike because we don't feel that you're being good stewards and negotiating with us fairly. The question is the negotiations or the ask from the nursing side of things kind of ridiculous? Is it a little too much to ask for, or is it not enough to ask for? Fair, I'll give you, living in the Metro Boston region is very expensive. Living in the Northeast can be very expensive. You live in Southern California. Right. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
But does it give you the right, in some instances, to be a bad actor and walk off the job as a dedicated, licensed healthcare professional?
And I guess that's the question that becomes a personal question to everybody listening, right?
It's the rub. It's the rub.
That's the personal question. Because, Rob, I agree with you. I can't imagine walking out on my patients, even if the hospital said, and in this case, they hired extra staff, so they overstaffed to minimize nurse to patient ratio, so that these nurses who didn't have any experience in this hospital would have a little bit more, I guess, time management resources or leeway to care for these patients. But the cost that they would, and I don't know what the cost is, the cost that it would take to hire, if 4,000 nurses go on strike and they're hiring more nurses than that, I don't know, 4,500. I don't know how many. I'm going to throw out 4,500.
Whatever that number is. Yep. Yeah. Does the number matter? No.
Does that cost to make their statement make them bad stewards at the same time? Right. So up till now, we've been talking about the healthcare professional walking off the job in that planned environment or in that planned situation. And the conversation has revolved around, is that appropriate or not? What about on the other side? What about the CEO, who in this case in 2024 made $8.4 million? Just the CEO. And let me give you some stats really quick about this company, right? About Mass General Brigham.
Yeah.
Total revenue is about $23 billion a year. Net assets is about $20 billion a year. The top 21 highest paid employees have a combined salary of about $161 million in one of the most recent years. The top 42 highest paid salaries, $309 million. That equates to about $7.3 million per those top paid employees. Now, I would argue that their pay is grossly exaggerated. In fact, the CEO had a 90% or 96% increase in pay between 2021 and 2024, which is the largest CEO pay growth in any Massachusetts hospital health system during that period of time. Is it possible, right? Because at the same time, it would take a minimum of 18 million, maximum of $24 million per year to fund that 3.5% net increase that the nurses were asking for. Is it possible that if they had just chosen to say, you know what, I'm not going to take 500,000 of the whatever percentage I'm taking next year of those top 42 employees, that would equate to $21 million per year. Enough to give these nurses their raises, and you can still live in your mansion. Is that too unreasonable of an ask? When you're making $8.4 million already, look, I know Boston's expensive, but it's not that expensive. Settle down. I'm sorry. And I understand you've worked hard to get to where you're at and you deserve to be paid and compensated for it. What I'm saying is when you make $8.4 million a year and you went up 96% in a 3-year period, $500,000 on your next raise can be foregone. And you're still going to be able to put food on the table. You're going to be all right. You're going to be able to pay your bills, right? You're going to be able to pay for whatever house, trailer, mansion you live in. You're going to be able to afford it. You're going to be all right.
I'm pretty sure they're not living in a trailer.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they're asking for 3.5%. And I would argue, going back to that, I would argue that in a city like Boston, remember, I'm from Southern California. Rob, you live in New England. We know where expensive can get expensive. I mean, I just got gas yesterday, and in California, I'm paying almost $6.30 a gallon. Yeah, I know expensive. I understand expensive. I get it, but at the same time, or not. I'm sorry, I got off track. Not at the same time. I understand expensive, and I understand that a 3.5% raise out here is barely COLA. It's barely cost of living right now because of inflation.
And a lot of hospitals, it is. And a lot of hospitals set their employee raises at 2%. 2%, right? 2.5%. They're already getting 5% across the board.
Under 20 years.
I get, and I appreciate that. Let me go back to I want to talk for a minute about the executive pay.
Sure.
So if you look, even in the past 2 years, there's been many articles that have come out in Becker's or Harvard Business Review that have spoke to executive compensation in healthcare. And specifically, while the people that are doing the work, and I'm just going to say the bedside, laboratory, anybody working in the hospital, they're getting 2%. The executives on average are getting 12 to 15% pay increases every single year. So why is there such a disparity between paying the people taking care of the patients, and that's everybody, right? Mm-hmm. The patient's in the center of that wheel. I don't care if you're in food service, you're in cleaning the floors, respiratory, whatever. You're taking care of the patient. And we're going to say, hey, we're going to give you 2%. Oh, but your healthcare costs just went up 2.5%.
Which also happened.
Yes.
In this case, the Mass General Brigham is proposing an increase of 2.5% in healthcare costs for one of their primary plans, which more than half of the nurses are part of. So of this even 3.5% increase they're asking for, they're looking at only getting 1% at the end of the day.
1%. And what does that get you? 1%.
And the nurses on that are getting 2.5%, if they get no raise over 20 years, they wind up at a net zero.
Yes. So if you factor in the rate of inflation, which we know has come down over the past year. However, you still have to calculate in your rate of inflation. You have to think about, to your point, Mike, the cost of gasoline, the cost of food, your property taxes if you own a home. Yeah. All these things exponentially go up, but healthcare workers' pay does not keep pace with it.
Right.
But why is it that healthcare executive pay never seems to take a cut?
Not only do they not take a cut, They can go up by 96% in a 3-year period.
96% in a 3-year period.
That's insane.
Yep. And
96%, that means this person started at $4 million a year.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, let's be real. Yep. I mean, if I made $4 million a year, would I still want to raise? Yes. But I like to think that I wouldn't be greedy, and I would look at the people that actually do the job. You are the executive in a healthcare organization. The care at the bedside is the reason that you get your $8.4 million. Yeah. It's the reason that 42 of the highest paid employees get $309 million, $7.3 million a year each on average.
So with that being said, do you think, in your personal, moral, ethical opinion, that what the M&A is asking for is unreasonable?
No, I actually don't. I don't think it's unreasonable. Now, do we go back to striking, which was the original question that we opened with?
The original question, yes.
That's a more personal thing for me. I personally couldn't find it within myself to strike. I had a friend who called me, who actually worked at Kaiser. It was Kaiser that went on strike out here in Southern California a few months ago. And I had a friend call me, and Kaiser and the M&A is going to hate me saying this, and I apologize now, but I'm going to be honest with you. He called me, and he was talking about, I can't even afford to put food on the table. We're striking. We're on this strike for this many days. I'm not getting paid. And my response was, why don't you cross? Why are you calling me? Yeah, why are you calling me to complain? You went on strike. Go get another job.
Yep.
And I told him, I said, if I were in your situation, rather than calling me to say, hey, what am I going to do? Because he was calling me, and venting, but at the same time, I'm a guy. I'm a very stereotypical guy. So my first, my go-to is problem solving.
Yeah.
My first response, and this is where the M&A and Kaiser is going to hate me. My first response was, be a scab. If you're worried about, if you can't afford to go on strike, that's a problem.
Why'd you go on strike?
So going on strike doesn't just hurt the patients, because these nurses that they brought in more nurses thinking that would cover it. I don't think it does. I think bringing in more nurses is evidence that you're bringing in people who didn't have a chance to orientate, and they're orientating on the fly. They probably barely know where the Pyxis is, barely know where the bathrooms are, can barely find the floors.
Yep.
And we're bringing them in because they have a license, and now they're just a warm body. That's not care. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how good they are at their job. If they're not orientated, 5 days doesn't make them orientated. Yes, they're better on day 5 than they were on day 1, but those first 4 days, you're putting patients in harm's way. And there were a number of patients and patients' families who said that call lights went unanswered, right? Nurses were rude. They weren't responsive. That's a problem. You have a responsibility, if you're an executive, to those patients, just like that healthcare professional, maybe even more, because you're responsible for that. It's just, sorry, I get on these, I get on my soapbox,
man. It's the rub. It's gotten under your skin.
Yeah. I get on my soapbox. And I don't believe, let me say really quick before you make your point, I don't believe that any one of these nurses, if given the choice, would walk out. I don't believe that's the case, right?
Okay.
It's hard, I believe, to say I'm not going in. It's hard because you don't get paid. It's hard because you're walking away from those patients. Does it make it okay ethically? No, I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't. It's
a hard thing.
It is and I believe that. I believe at the end of the day, I hope that those healthcare workers, those nurses said, this was likely the hardest decision of my life to not show up to work. And I think there's bad actors here on both sides of the table. We're not taking sides. There's bad actors on both sides of the table.
There always are.
Yes. There always are, right? People need to realize that. I think what rubbed me the wrong way is when I saw some social media posts where the nurses were standing there and they were not allowed to come back into the hospital the next morning. There was security, et cetera, standing there. And here's their head, whatever, person who's representing all of these nurses standing there saying, well, it's going to be 7 o'clock. We're ready to come back to work. And the people standing there said, no, you're not. You're not allowed back in the building today. And the argument back and forth was, but we're ready to come back to work. Well, we're not letting you in. I'm having a hard time morally and ethically with this because the reasons that you walked out the door were financial. They weren't, and I'm not saying they're financial, because that, in my opinion, is everything that I see in the data, everything that I see posted wasn't about improving staffing. It wasn't about ensuring better patient care. It was about money. On both sides of the fence. And it's on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, there is more to the dispute than just wages. Wages is always what comes to what rises to the top, right? But they are they want limits on reliance for travel nurses, which means more nursing staff, continuity of care, right? So that's part of this too, right? Mm-hmm. We can't forget that there are these other things. We get focused on the money because we think it's the money.
Well, it is about money. At the end of the day, if you're saying we want less reliance on travelers, okay, but how are you going to fill the gaps? Where are these nurses coming from? If you have a gap in the number of people that you have available to take care of the patients, you've got to get these people from somewhere. So what do you do?
Yeah, but what are those gaps? Are those gaps? And let's be, you're in management. I'm not. I don't know if we consider what I do management. I'm in charge of stuff. We both deal with budgets.
We do.
At the end of the day, if you don't have the budget in the department, whether it's nursing, respiratory, rad tech, whatever, even the kitchen, if you don't have money in the budget from the higher ups, you can't fill a position. Even if you have a position, if you don't have the budget, you can't do it. You're can't,
right. You're not wrong.
So I take that back to the executives and the $20 billion in net assets per year, and the $309 million being paid out to the 42 highest and paid employees. And I say, wait a minute. Maybe what we've done is we've gotten greedy, right? And we've gotten greedy at that executive level. That C-suite level has gotten greedy. And I realize at some point healthcare becomes a business, but we have to be very careful of allowing it to, I'll say, remain a business. You have business aspects, sure, budgets, right?
The whole thing is a business, whether you want to believe it or not.
No, I'm not saying it's not a business. I'm saying we have to watch that we don't treat it as a business all the time.
We are treating it like a business all the time. That is, in my opinion, we are treating it like a business all the time. And everything you're saying is right. If I didn't budget for these travel staffing, right? But let's say all of a sudden I have a gap in my number of people that I have available to take care of the patients. I can only pull from my staffing well so many times.
Right.
And that's what we do in healthcare. I'm just going to say it. This is what we do in bedside clinical healthcare all the time. We pull from the same well, which is our staff who have dedicated themselves to being part of the organization all the time. And when those gaps exist, we need to fill them. But we make stuff up. I'm just going to say it. In some instances, not all organizations, but in some organizations, we make it up. We change the ratios, or we say, oh, we don't have staffing rate, nurse to patient ratios here. Oh, well, the other night, well, we had a 7-to-1 nursing ratio and nobody died, right? So it becomes the norm. Or, well, we have managers, they're licensed, we'll just use them. And then we don't have to pay them any overtime. We don't have to pay them differentials.
Right.
So where's the line? When does the line get crossed on both sides of the fence, right? So this goes back to, why do these healthcare professionals, why did they make a decision to walk out the door? You're right, Mike. It's bigger and broader than probably just money, but it always does focus at the end of the day on wages.
I understand. No, I agree. And I need to push back just a little bit, because what I was getting at was, yes, we know that it's a business. It has to run as a business at some point, because that's how people get paid. That's how they have income. That's how they have expenses. I get it. And we create budgets. That's fine. At the same time, if those 42 highest paid employees get stuck on line items and forget about the patient at the bedside, that's where the problem begins. Because they start to make cuts here and they make cuts here, and they go, well, we don't need this. How do you know? You're in an office somewhere nowhere near the patients. You're out of touch. You don't know. Yet you're able to create a budget that gets you a good substantial raise. You're forgetting where the work's done. You're forgetting who does the work. You're forgetting how it's done. And let's not forget that at the end of the day, there are 3 things that ruin morale. You mess with wages, you mess with vacation, you mess with schedules. If you leave those 3 things alone, 3.5% would have avoided all of the cost, all of the bad publicity of those 5 days.
Agreed.
3.5%. And you have it.
I agree.
So that's where I look at that. And I don't, I'm trying to stay kind of center, because when we talk about walking out on the patient and striking, I am against that. However, I guess I'm finding that I'm more against, and I'm finding as we talk here, Rob, I apologize. I'm more against what pushed them to have to make that decision in the first place.
Mike, this
$20 billion in assets. You're giving yourselves $1 million, $2 million a year raises, and you don't have 20 million bucks somewhere stocked away.
So I
don't believe it.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I think that disparity is starting, and it's not just happening now, right? There's a light being shined on this disparity of healthcare executive wages. And again, I'm going to go back to articles in Becker's Healthcare, articles in Harvard Business Review. So I'm not pulling stuff out of the air. This is factual stuff. You can go and read these articles yourself. While you're giving your employees 2%, you went up on their insurance 2.5%, and inflation, let's say, is at 4%. You're always running in the negative. We're running, right? The people at the bedside are running in the negative. And again, how much is, I don't know, how much is enough, right? I saw another video. I'm just going to be honest.
And that's a great question.
I watched another social media video, because I've been kind of following this on different platforms. I don't care what's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. We came here to talk about this. So I watch, again, the M&A. I watch the nurses, putting their social media posts out there. There were patients out front of MGB supporting the nurses. And there are also some videos out there with people coming on board going, what are you complaining about? When you work a holiday, you're making $109 an hour. This is your shift differential. This is your weekend differential. How much is too much? How much more do you want? Right? So again, we're not taking a side. We're kind of walking the fine line on both sides of the, right? Don't go on strike. We don't feel from an ethical standpoint that's the right thing to do.
Not at all.
Hey, healthcare executives, wake up. Okay, you're not crying poor. You're not hurting. The organization has assets. We get that. Take care of your employees. And that really goes back to the entire purpose of unions, right?
Yeah.
Because the people running the companies abused their employees, and so unions came out of the fact that
absolutely
people own the company abused their 100%, employees, right?
100%, yeah. The whole requirement for unionized workforce came out of this type of an issue.
People got treated like crap.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
People died on the line. People lost fingers. Children were working 12-hour days.
Yep.
Children. Because it was about making money. It was about bad actors. It was about abuse of the employees. So again, not trying to take a side, but there's bad, I think, on both sides of the equation here. And everybody needs to come to the table. And again, yes, it's a business, but we're in the business of taking care of other humans. That's the business we're in health care.
100%.
Okay. We're not making widgets here.
Right.
Okay? We're not making widgets. We are in the business of supporting our communities, keeping the doors open and the lights on. And I appreciate that's a real struggle right now for a lot of organizations. But at the end of the day, what is your mission, vision, and value? It is about being there so the people in the community get health in healthcare.
Absolutely.
I'm jumping off my soapbox now.
No, you're great. I think that's a great place to close up here. Absolutely.
I agree. All right.
I am sure that there are a bunch of people that agree and disagree with each one of us and want to pick stuff apart. And we want you to do that.
Yes,
comment down below on the clips. Reach out. Let's if there's something we can do, let's figure it out.
Yeah,
but Rob,
we want to hear from all of you. So
absolutely.
With that being said, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let's Get Ethical.